The first victim of Adolf Hitler was Czechoslovakia. Great Britain and France did not allow the small state in Central Europe to defend itself. Meanwhile, the Czechoslovak army was preparing a great welcome for Hitler. Fort Stasselberg was to be the largest on the border between Czechoslovakia and Hitler's Silesia. The Wehrmacht was to be greeted by 12 fortified positions. 10 howitzers, 4 mortars, and anti-tank guns were to shower the invader with more than 200 shells and mines in 1 minute. The underground giant remained unfinished. Let's go together to the places where tourists can't go. One of the directions through which Hitler's troops could have tried to invade Czechoslovakia was the Libava Saddle, the border between the Krkonoše Mountains and the Kro Mountains in northern Bohemia. This pass was used by the Hussites to invade Silesia in the 15th century. In the opposite direction, the Prussian army penetrated Bohemia in 1866 here. On Hitler's way to Bohemia, the underground fortress Stasselberg was to be built. The plans envisaged the construction of 3.5 kilometers of underground tunnels, a total of 11 fortress logs connected by corridors and 1 separate observation room. The Stasselberg fortress was to be the largest artillery fortress of the Czechoslovak fortifications when completed. Of the nearly 3.5 kilometers of interconnecting adits, all have been driven at least in partial profile. 85% of the full profile has been stamped. Only the connecting tunnel to the ES-75 building, and part of it have been concreted. This area was to be used as an ammunition store, and volunteers from the Stasselberg Association, who are building an underground museum here, prepared a demonstration of what the underground looked like in the various phases of construction. But I promised you a visit to places outside the visitor circuit, and so we head down the unfinished corridor to the under construction building, S-77. The construction of a fortress to stop the enemy on the eastern edge of the giant mountains was considered as early as 1935. The decision to build a fortress under the 632 Stasselberg was made in 1937. In 1937, the Hitler threat was very topical, so the decision was made to build the underground giant as quickly as possible. The first day of work was 16 October 1937, and 1,500 workers worked continuously in 3 shifts. The fortress was to be completed in just 2 years and 2 months. It would take some time to install the technology, and by 1940, the fortress, which the Germans themselves admitted they could not capture militarily, would be ready for defense. We moved on to the partially constructed underground barracks. Some parts of the makeshift gunpowder are still there in their original positions. Others were built as part of the exposition. We're now going to turn off the visitor circuit again and step back in time. When the Germans seized the border area, the unfinished fortress was of no use to them. It was quickly flooded and remained flooded until 2000. When one of the caves that held water underground finally gave way and divers explored the area. At one time, it even looked like tourist tours would only be possible by boat. Today, water from underground is diverted by a modern working adit from the building, 78 coming out on the mountainside. Building S-78 has been partially concreted. At the time of the Munich betrayal, there was a woodpile. It's still there today. Speaking of betrayal, the Czechoslovakian defense was conceived in cooperation with Great Britain and France. The Allies were expected to take a month to mobilize and open a second front, putting Germany in an untenable position militarily. Germany has never been able to wage war on two fronts, and it proved this both before and after 1938. The Fortress project therefore envisaged complete self-sufficiency for 2 months. The garrison of the fortress would consist of between 800 and 1,000 soldiers. What would have happened to the Czechoslovakia if it had defended itself is still under discussion. If a permanent fortification could have been completed, Czechoslovakia would have defended itself for a month or two. What would have happened afterwards is speculation. Perhaps someone would have succeeded in doing what Stauffenberg and a few others failed to do. Wehrmacht losses would have been considerable, considering that German tanks were worthless in 1938, and that at Stachelberg alone, 10 100mm howitzers with a range of 12 kilometers were to greet the German army, and what the howitzers couldn't do, 8 anti-tank guns with a range of 6 kilometers and a rate of fire of 35 rounds per minute were to wait. A Nazi breakthrough through Stachelberg was not very likely. I dare speculate that the completed fortifications were capable of inflicting unacceptable losses on the Germans within the 1 month we were supposed to hold out without Allied help. This is nicely explained by the fact that Hitler insisted on speeding up the invasion of Czechoslovakia, despite the generals urging him that the Wehrmacht still needed time to arm. The arms race ended up the way it did because Deladier, Chamberlain, and Beanies were quicker to screw up than to arm. With Beanies fucked up, the builders and soldiers left Stachelberg, and the underground filled with water. As it stands today, one Stachelberg is actually 2. Buildings sets of 79 and Sadie have taken their toll due to a quarry that has removed part of the hill. When Laco's Historical Underground Research Society explored here in 2007, the miners were just at the level of the main connecting passage. By 2011, there was no trace of it, and the 71 and 76 buildings are in a separate part of the hill, now inaccessible. The videos of their exploration look quite adventurous, and I don't know if they will ever be published. Meanwhile, we turned in front of the cave-in separating the main corridor from the quarry to the completed emergency exit 72. It is over 50 meters by stairs to the surface and the newly built exit. Well, since not all the water has drained from underground, and I only have lights on a small tripod, I decided to take the water into play and illuminated the staircase in a way that even Laco didn't do. And that's saying something. So this is one of the most remarkable underground buildings in Czech territory, of which Sikhs could be proud. Finally, they could not be proud of our political representation. The Munich betrayal by Great Britain and France is still a trauma for the Czechs today. The debate about whether Czechoslovakia should have defended itself against Hitler will probably never end in Bohemia.